controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a sub-science here to make things make sense. Brain fog. The fog is coming over the hills.
Do you have any experience with brain fog, or is like because you actually thought of this topic?
Yeah. And I thought of this topic because I was reading about it, but also I feel it's interesting because I think we're coming up on the holiday. I've gotten a lot of my work done, and I just feel absolutely burnt out by our job. And I just feel like I have brain fog right now. And that's what made me start to get interested in it, read about it, and then be like, we should do a podcast on it.
Yeah, I'd love to find out, because I feel like the term, even looking up stuff around brain fog online and the science behind it, is it's not that it's vague, but it's like, it can mean a lot. And different, whether they're actually diagnosed disorders versus just like feeling kind of cloudy or foggy. Like, it's kind of this abstract concept that people with different problems can identify as brain fog.
Yeah, a vague colloquial term for when you feel scatterbrained and mentally impaired.
Like, I feel that all the time.
Well, it's just like, it's hard. You're like, of course this is hard to like study. But one thing I'll say just off the top is that there are experiences of brain fog that can be due to neuroimmune diseases like celiac diseases, chronic fatigue syndrome. If you have chemotherapy, a specific side effect is brain fog, and even transitioning in menopause. Like I just want to first say, before we get into more science for everyone, that there are actually medical diagnosis for brain fog, and the exact reason why we'll get into scientifically throughout this episode. But just know that like Mitch and I aren't saying we have like celiac disease and have brain fog.
No, but I will say, separately from you, and I think it's different, I have had some pretty intense periods of my life with a kind of thing that I would identify as brain fog, that, you know, my and I won't talk about it yet, but like my research, or what I wanted to talk about, was depersonalization, and this idea of feeling like disassociated from yourself. And I have had that. And now there's conversations around like COVID and its implications on brain fog. My experiences have like been before COVID, so I don't think mine have come from that. I don't think I've had COVID. All I mean is like, I understand what you mean sometimes, and it's just like being exhausted and stuff. But I've also had this weirder thing where I'm not tired, I'm not necessarily overworked or stressed, and yet I feel disconnected from my own body and mind.
Yeah, and I've been there beside you while it's happening too, and I'm like, whoa, okay, true.
So where do you think you fall on that spectrum? Like, what does brain fog feel like to you?
Okay, so the reason why I found this so fascinating was, I don't think it's like controversial subject, and then that's gonna be tense because it's a controversial subject, because it's like, I was sitting on the couch like, I have brain fog, I can't focus on anything, I'm feeling insane, I don't want to do anything, and it just felt so foggy, and I was just opening my phone, refreshing, like just being so, I was like, this is a weird feeling that happens to me only sometimes when I feel like I'm like completely like exhausted.
Yeah.
But then in doing my research, like scientific research, it was all relating to inflammation in the brain, cytokines like interleukin 1, interleukin 3, literally these specific cytokines getting released in your brain, causing the impaired cognition due to actual factors like that, like
something actually going on in your life.
Yeah. So like COVID, for example, long COVID is something that's we talk about a lot on this show. We don't have enough information on it right now to really have like
concrete science.
Which is, I know, hard for people to hear, but that's just how science works. And the only reason they're saying it could like relate to brain fog is because they actually study that like through the olfactory mucosa in your nose, there's a chance that the virus can actually like get through the vagal tract and increase cytokine release in your brain. And there's ideas that like cytokine storms are part of the like reason people end up in the hospital, when your body is going into this overload of cytokines to try and it's like the body, quote unquote, eating itself. Like it's like your immune system overworking, and interleukin 1 and 3 can affect cognition and neuroinflammation and get into your brain. So it's like, okay, that's the only way they're saying it could be related. And that's an actual physiological pathway that when I'm sitting on the couch, I'm like, well, it's not that. You know what I mean?
Obviously, but it could be related to that. Like if you're having, I guess for you, maybe it's not stress related, but I'm saying it could be, maybe you're burnt out. It is the end of the year. You know what I mean? Like maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you don't have the resources to just go in and be super creative right now because you're like tired.
Yeah. And they were also an emotionally drained. Like they were saying that when they do studies on people who have chemo or menopause or COVID, those are all situations that are emotionally draining.
Right.
So the brain fog, they're trying to find the physiological reasons in the brain, but who knows, right? Like maybe it is this feeling when you're emotionally drained, and in no way am I comparing my life to that at all.
Right.
But I'm just like, okay, like that was kind of interesting that they were like, on top of all this, it could just be that all these situations are intense and then your brain essentially can't handle it.
I thought the weirdest part about it, reading about it, was that it is very different from like being tired, right? Like you can have a brain fog and there's sort of a cognitive decrease in a lot of ways for people. So when people have brain fog, in most studies, they can actually experimentally show that their cognition's maybe not as high, or their reaction time, or those kind of things.
But they've slept well or something?
Yeah,
or
the
not?
person... it's not to say they've necessarily slept well, because they might not be sleeping well, and that might be part of
true.
the problem. But it's not the same as feeling tired, right? Like somewhere I saw it described in a study, like not like it's being in a coma, but like being in a coma is not the same as being asleep, right? But it's like a cognitive difference in your brain versus going to sleep is a very different thing. So a lot of people with brain fog have it, and they're not like, I need to go to bed necessarily, or that I'm feeling fatigued. It's actually, I just am feeling cognitively impaired for a reason that is not clear.
I'm just thinking if it was a coma was the same as sleep, we're like, I'm tired, put me in a coma. Like there'd be like coma centers where you would go and just like really recharge. But it's like, no, that is a very different thing.
Yeah, you're not really necessarily. I don't know much about comas, to be honest. I'd actually be interesting to like do a video or even an episode on comas.
Yeah, because it's like we experience them all the time in like every movie and TV show.
Yeah.
There's always a plot line where it's like, oh, just put them in a coma and have them like live out their fantasy that way or whatever.
Yeah, and there's induced comas.
Whoa, writing that down, comas.
Okay, yeah, comas.
And hopefully we don't like, because sometimes we make ASAP science videos, and every time we make the video, what we're making the video about happens to us. So hopefully Mitch and I both don't end up in comas for a week, and then we come back and have a real good episode on it.
Yeah. I will talk a little bit about my experience with this depersonalization stuff.
Do it. This is
It was
crazy.
actually a few years ago, maybe like longer now, because the pandemic has skewed my perception of time. It's probably like 4 years ago. In a random February, I woke up one day and just felt so weird. Like I was disassociated from my body. Like it kind of felt like I was so aware that I'm a thing trapped inside this body. And like my movements and stuff felt weird. Okay, that was weird, but I was like, maybe I'm sick. But then it lasted for like a month or two.
Yeah,
straight.
and it was...
And I remember like feeling I was going to cry every day.
It was winter. I just remember being, because it was like constantly like vitamin D.
Yeah,
like,
I kept being like, first I was like, oh, I just need to take Advil. Maybe I'm like getting a headache. Then I was like, maybe I should take allergy pills. Then I was like, maybe I have a sleep disorder, and I went and like did a bunch of sleep tests. And then I was like, maybe it's because it's the winter and I'm not getting vitamin D. Am I sick? Do I have a virus? Like I didn't understand. I'd never felt that way ever in my life. That was probably like the scariest sort of like health thing I've ever experienced chronically. It has never come back for that length. Like it probably lasted to like a month and a half, but every now and then I'll have a day where it happens.
and didn't you do things? Like you were like testing and like...
Yeah, I just feel like I went and got blood tests. I went and
Yeah.
got x-rays. I went and got like all these things, and nothing, when you do that and like nothing came up. Like there wasn't, I was like, there's a tumor in my brain. I kept thinking all these crazy things because I was like, literally, that's what I want to talk about. So depersonalization is like the detachment with yourself, with your body, and like it says being a detached observer.
A detached observer.
So like it really felt like I was something separate from my body, and I was like living in an existence that was like fake. Like it felt like I was in a dream for a month and a half. And so like everything felt sort of weird and vague. And so when this happens chronically, it's known as derealization, when you're like disassociated from your own body.
Oh.
Yeah, so depersonalization on a chronic basis is called derealization,
Oh, okay,
which is
okay,
in a Bo
okay.
Burnham song. So I suppose he's had experience with that as well.
Oh yeah, dereal. Derealize it. No, what is it? It's like
It's like derealization.
Yeah.
I don't know when he says the word.
wow. When you do it, it's so pretty. You were like, and I was like, derealization. Okay.
Anyway, I'm trying really hard to think of when he says the word, but it's in that song.
Derealization, and that is all I know.
But it can happen to anyone in non-chronic situations, and often in studies they show it can be brought upon by anxiety or stress. But chronic depersonalization is often more related to those people who have either severe trauma or prolonged stress and anxiety. I remember thinking at that time, I didn't feel overly stressed. Like, that is the thing I go to now, because a lot of my life I'll feel unwell or whatever. I'm having a weird physical experience and I go, okay, first thing I have to think about is, am I overstressed right now?
Okay, I'm gonna. This
What?
is so personal. We're on a podcast. I'm like, well,
How personal?
You are. Okay.
Okay, what do you want to say?
No. Like 4 years ago, I noticed an issue with you're just such a different person. You're so much better at accepting the fact that, like, oh my God, how do I even say this? It's
I'm going to kill you.
No. Yeah, just like, and I'm gone. No, like, you 4 years ago had a really hard time acknowledging that things were ever wrong.
Okay.
Like, I think you self-identified as a perfectionist. You're so much better now. I think you were so stressed at the time of life. I remember I was so stressed. I'm like, we're stressed. This is so stressful. So many stressful things were happening. But you were like, no, like, you were, it was like you were, as a partner who was beside you all the time, I was like, he's denying how stressful this life is. Was like,
maybe.
I'm just saying, like, when you're thinking,
Yeah.
like, I wasn't actually stressed, like, you're now able to be like, acknowledge that saying that your life is stressful or that things are going wrong doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Oh, yeah.
More than you
And
could 4 years ago.
To be honest, I think
you were
with
stressed,
a
is my point.
condition or a problem like that, I've only now realized what chronic stress can do to me, and that it doesn't go away immediately. So even when you start like fixing or trying to get better, it's like, I think I was in the moment being like, okay, I'm going to take time off, and it wouldn't go away. And then it made me realize over time I've had more experience with stress and anxiety and been like, that's not really how it works. Like, for myself anyway, I really have to put in a lot of work to get a good habit, get good sleep schedules, be physically active. Like, all these things add up over months and months, on top of fighting like stress and anxiety from work.
Is this related to brain fog though? Like, would they say depersonalization?
So depersonalization
is
a form of brain fog. Yeah. So a lot of people who have depersonalization describe it as brain fog, because it feels like they're a little confused. It feels like they are not in reality, and so your cognition feels like heavily impaired. Like, I remember I would sit down and try and work for an hour and be like, I'm dizzy, or I just feel like I'm not here. I can't work. So
okay. So I also have a question for you, because, like, you always self-identify as someone who has a bad memory. Mm-hmm. And then when I was like, one of the studies was about pregnant people and how, like, quote unquote pregnancy brain, like, people say that they are like forgetful, and they were trying to be like, is this brain fog? Can we diagnose it the way we would with someone who, like, has celiac disease and has brain fog due to inflammation in their brain?
Yeah.
Like, and they actually found that they couldn't find many physiological markers, and their prediction was A, it's something we tell pregnant people, that you will forget things, and then B, it's such a traumatic, again, emotional thing to be going through. You're about to give birth, you're carrying life inside you. Pregnant women are the most amazing things in the world, in my opinion. Like, whenever you know what I mean? I'm like, it's the most unbelievable, incredible, challenging feat of a human can do. And, you know, for better or worse, or sadly, men, you never get to experience what it actually feels like to, like, really carry life. So I just think that also could be part of it. You're just, like, viscerally, like, losing sleep, dealing with the cognitive idea of birthing something. So anyways, they weren't able to find the direct correlation, but they did say that the reason they thought was because pregnant women sometimes say, oh, I'm forgetting. And you always talk about how you're forgetting things all the time. And I'm like, is that brain fog? Like, are you someone who you're like, I'm dealing with brain fog, like, a lot?
I don't, for me, I don't express, like, my forgetfulness as brain fog. Like, it seems like it maybe is related, but for me, it was like a totally different sensation. Like, I just generally am bad at remembering, but
you remember like your keys. Like, I'm forgetful. Like, I just leave the house and, you know, I'm like, oh shit, I forgot my mask, and I have to, like, come home. Whereas you don't forget things. You're just don't remember things the next day. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's not. I forgetful is a triggering word for me, because I feel like I am forgetful, but I remember everything.
I think that is just the difference between us, and I think you see me as extreme in some ways, but I think there are lots of people like me who
true.
maybe I don't exactly know why. I can remember things once I get a trigger point. Once
No,
you
you're
give me
right. I know
something,
so many people who can like.
Just kind of like forgetful.
Yeah, and I know
I'm
people
not
who-
forgetful of because I'm anxious. I'll be like phone keys. Well, every time. I do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. But you.
But I also implant those habits in my life because I find myself to be forgetful if I don't. So that's why I do like the slap, phone, wallet, keys, mask.
The slap. Yeah, no,
Do you
that's
not do
interesting.
that? I slap my chest, I slap my both pockets, and then put my hand in my jacket.
I just like
pocket.
you before you leave, just absolutely slapping like
Macarena.
red thighs. I'm like, whoa, boy. Okay, yeah. So, okay, no, that makes sense. I just, brain fog. I guess the more I was researching, I was like, maybe I don't have it. Maybe I'm just on my phone too much.
Well, I think that's the thing, and this can be described as a symptom of many different problems, and some are probably way more severe, as you mentioned. Even having a disease or chronic illness can lead to this.
And early Alzheimer's disease can also brain fog.
You might
is
have
like
a literal,
yeah. Some people go to
Forgetfulness.
the doctor with what they say is brain fog, and then they get diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So it's not something you should ignore.
Yeah, and
If you feel like you have it.
Like one thing that my study found was that soldiers have higher rates when they're training because they're sleep deprived, they're going through starvation and stress, and so brain fog is way more common. So as an anxious person, it almost makes more sense to me that I would have experienced it a lot in my life. The chronic part for me freaked me out, but maybe it was like I did find out I have like partially a sleeping disorder in terms of like sleep apnea that I've had to like work really hard on sleeping well. Like sometimes now I have a little Fitbit. It's like, you got 5 minutes of deep sleep. I'm like, okay, that is not good for me to know.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
But I feel it sometimes. No, but I try.
Hashtag not sponsored. I'm like, I don't know if a Fitbit's good for you, Mitch.
No, because I also have anxiety about my heart rate, so that's why I got this. Because I'm always like touching my pulse.
Well,
on my
okay,
neck.
this is the thing with the Fitbit and relates to this. Like, a lot of these brain fog studies, especially on the pregnant people, they're like, it's nocebo. It's like thinking you have something. So it's like maybe the Fitbit's going to give you nocebo.
Okay, that might be true, but what I will say is what infuriates me most is when, and I'm not saying you're doing this right now, but obviously this idea of like psychosomatic, like giving yourself diseases or issues, that can totally be a real thing. Obviously, you can give yourself like placebo your way or nocebo your way into feeling something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you also kind of have to like listen to people because a placebo is real.
Oh my God. I didn't mean to say that in general. I meant the Fitbit.
Oh.
I meant the Fitbit might nocebo you was my point. Not that you're noceboing yourself.
Because of that, I always try to evaluate how I'm feeling in the morning, and I only like have recently
Before
gotten
reading
this.
the Fitbit.
Yeah, I go like,
that's
do
cool.
I feel tired or not? Because I know it's very common. It's a conversation right now that people will use their apps to tell them how to feel, and it might actually make them feel more tired.
It is so wild that like placebo and nocebo are real.
Yeah, we need to
Like
do a
there's
full
so
episode
many studies
on
that I have read some placebo studies so deeply because I was like, this is annoying. Like this can't be real.
It
like,
feels fake.
And then they're like these weird double-blind, well-done studies where you're like, what?
Where it's like cured people of crazy
And I'm
disease.
like,
They just give
Nature
them like
magazine. Are you lying?
yeah. Well, write it down as.
But
an
it's
episode
also,
slash next
but it's
episode.
also overdone too. Like everyone's always like, you're right. Everyone's always like, yeah,
Because
placebo, but
it's-
it's like relax.
It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
sometimes.
And there's even studies where they told people it's a placebo, and it still made them feel so much better. Or like, I won't say cured, but they come back and be like, my back pain's gone, even though I know what you gave me was fake.
Oh my God, now I'm writing down back pain. Oh wait, well we already did chiropractor, but it's similar. But like there's so many controversial subjects and the facts can be tense.
Yeah, well, another thing I used to describe my brain fog as an out-of-body experience, but doing research realized that is a completely other thing where people literally are like seeing their bodies.
Oh my God, like they're playing Second Life. They're playing GTA with themselves.
Well, for some people, it's either can be like extreme stress.
Wait, are you serious? It's like Sims. Like they're like, that's me getting out of bed and I'm looking at it as if I'm playing a video game.
Like near-death experiences,
That is
or
insane.
sometimes when people are having sleep disorders, or like in the stages between sleep, might actually feel like they're out of their body looking at themselves.
Okay, now when I'm reading this freaking Brainscapes book, I'm like, that's totally possible. Like literally your brain is just a bunch of neurons perceiving things. Like, of course that perception can be altered in a near-death experience or a coma or a brain injury or a weird sleep part.
Yeah, something that always
so freaky.
messes with my mind is when and we probably talked about this before, it's just like you have to remember that your brain is actually not trying to see the world as it is. Like, we can only interpret what our brain needs to interpret.
Oh, yeah.
There's UV light.
Yeah.
There's so many different wavelengths we just can't see because they're not relevant to us. Your brain isn't like an objective measuring tool for the world around
It's
you.
literally it's only a measuring tool visually for the visual light spectrum,
For
which
what's
is
relevant.
a sliver of the electromagnetic
Yeah,
spectrum.
yeah,
Like, that is
exactly.
crazy. Also, your brain, like, this is going back to the book, but like, if you look at something, it focuses in on that specific thing. So if you move your eye around, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm looking at that thing. But there still is the whole visual cortex around where your brain is focusing.
Yeah.
And they were like, if the visual cortex itself in your brain, which is pretty efficient, would need to be at least 13 times bigger if your eyes were to take in everything equally.
Say that again. Sorry. I was only half listening because I was scrolling on my page. Say the last part. Say the last part.
Oh my God, I hope it made sense though. I don't know.
Maybe it did. And I just say it one more time.
Okay, so it's like, when you focus in on something across the wall,
Yeah.
and your eye, even reading a book, it has to focus as it moves along.
Yes.
The visual cortex, the back of your head, they think physiologically, so you'd have to have a big mound of freaking skull and weird stuff back there, would need to be 13 times bigger if your eyes were to take in everything equally.
Oh,
and
wow.
not focus on them.
If you didn't have
the
that.
focusing capability that we have as humans.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. It would be crazy if you could focus on
Yeah.
like everything in your field of vision.
But then, like, they were saying some animals kind of do.
oh, wow.
Or like there's just,
Have
we all
different
perceive so
forms.
differently as animals,
Yeah.
but like ours is like a focal one.
Yes.
And it is true. It's like, this is efficient. Like, if I took this all in, I'd be like, oh my
Spotlight
God.
focus.
I would be so distracted by whoever's outside.
I mean, that... Actually, I'm not going to get into this. Where should we go from here?
Whatever you scrolled to, babes.
Oh, I was just seeing what else I had written. Because there's also like cloudy consciousness, which is like another form that is described as brain fog.
I would hope those are similar.
Yeah, I don't know. There's just
Actually, I
lots
have cloudy consciousness, not brain fog.
I'm trying to figure out what else I had wrote. Did you do any more looking into the COVID-19 stuff?
Well, okay. It's essentially when you get bad COVID, you can have an increase in a lot of inflammation.
Okay, so that's why they think it's
biochemical inflammation molecules in your body. Some of those pass the blood-brain barrier. Physiologically, that will lead to cognitive impairments. We know this because part of getting COVID, and I think many people will have known this, is like you actually, you see things. If it's really bad, you have really intense cognitive impairments. Some people like see really awful things. Like, it becomes a physiological and quite psychologically damaging disease. So obviously there's things affecting your brain. So their whole thing about long COVID, there's no proof that in any way COVID causes brain fog
Right. It's
right
just
now,
kind of like
but they're looking at the
anecdotal.
pathways of the virus and what it does and thinking, okay, there's like, there could easily be something that in the future we'll know more about.
Okay.
But there's no proof. And there are, as I said, interleukin 1, interleukin 3, cytokines, inflammatory factors that go into your brain if you've got bad COVID. And that's going to affect your brain and cause your brain to inflame, which
Do you feel like
leads to brain
I'm
fog.
switching from COVID because I realized I asked you that, but you had kind of already answered it.
No, but it's good to know because it's what people talk about a lot.
I'm curious, like, how you feel about your brain in general. Like, I'm asking, like, not in like how intelligent you are or whatever, but do you feel like your brain's just always cooperating with you? And I don't mean psychologically; I mean like physically. Like, I would say for myself, to give the example, is I always feel like I'm fighting a battle with my brain. Like, because there's times when I'm just like, my brain is way too physically exhausted, or I have a headache, or I wake up feeling like a little dizzy one day. Like, I do feel like my brain, I'm like, ugh, what is wrong with it? But then when I'm feeling good, I'm feeling good. But I feel like, within a week, a couple times in that week, I'm going to be like, oh, this is a brain day. This is a brain day where my brain is like impaired.
Wow.
But that's when I think maybe I do have like a problem with sleeping or something like that. That's like affecting me.
So I love to sleep. I sleep a lot, and we have a very like privileged life in the sense that we work from this dang house. I mean, in some ways we're trapped in a jail, but like we don't ever have to get up for a certain time. So I go to bed pretty early and I sleep as long as I feel like I need to in most cases. So that was just sort of the sleep thing. Like, I haven't had that. I don't ever feel like I'm deprived of sleep unless I'm drinking or I've done it to myself. And then I'm
Right.
like, you did this to yourself, and it kind of helps
Right.
me
It makes sense.
cope
Then.
because
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm not going to like be mad at my brain. I'm like, I did this, even though we are technically the same thing. Now I'm having depersonalization. Okay. And I'm like, no, the brain is me. I am the brain. I am the brain. I know that I'm the brain.
Are you? Because think of this. You probably don't know where every organ is in your body, and yet your brain does.
Where did you read that? Did you think of that?
I saw it on TikTok.
Oh my God. I was like, tattoo that on your damn body. If you thought of that, 'cause that's so interesting.
Isn't it weird that like your brain understands where everything in your body is? Every neuron.
Wait, Mitch, that is why you feel depersonalization. I actually think I'm having a panic attack. I'm like, that is insane. It's literally chatting to my pancreas all day. I'm like, where's my pancreas?
Because it's literally like, yeah, that goes back to your...
I want to barf.
You actually not perceiving the world. It's like your brain's only lets you know your consciousness know what it needs to know.
Literally, you're crazy. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually fine with my brain, but you're just actually asking amazing questions that are making me have a fully be like, no. And now I'm like, yeah, of course. Oh my God, I'm panicking. Okay, another thing that's weird about this, like, was just like the touch, like S1 part of our brain. Like thinking about our bodies is just like, every part of our body is like covered in skin. It's like so weird. And then it's just like the eyes are weird. Like when I was reading about it, I was thinking about the eyes and how they kind of like there's a sliver, and then all of a sudden there's just like this bulgy thing that like when
eyes
you
are weird.
Isn't that weird? And it's just also like the skin closes and opens, and like after reading it, I kind of like looked around at a dinner and I was like, I had a weird moment of like, we're all just fucking animals. Like, this is so weird. Because it's like, you know what I mean? Like we're covered in skin, and then there's just like slits, these two fleshy eyeballs, some holes for nostrils, ears, anus, which develops first, penis hole, mouth, but everything else is just like blanketed in this stuff that touches.
Yeah.
So freaking weird. Okay, so anyways, I do really like my brain though. I'm just like, oh my God, am I panicking?
Do you ever feel
it's listening to me? I have to say I like it.
Like, you know, I think it's like Men in Black where there's a little alien inside the human.
Mitch, I literally don't, but you're making me feel like it right now, and
like
now
that.
I'm panicking, and I'm like, what?
Even when I meditate, sometimes I'm like, there's like a couple different layers of voices. Like there's like the person that's like thinking,
my God, I'm actually
and then there's
out.
a voice that goes like, okay, you should stop thinking, like turn your voice, and then there's another one that goes like, who's that? Who's talking right now?
Mitch, this is freaking me out. And I will say, until you brought this frickin' up, I'm like, no, I've never thought of that. I've always just been like, yeah, on my brain, and now I'm fully dissociating. I'm like, what is happening right now? I hate it. I want to like Men in Black my brain and just never talk about this. I'm like, everyone listening, like, I'm sorry.
Hopefully no one else is having a panic attack.
No, okay, I'm not actually. I will just say that like these are really cool things to think about. And in this moment, I'm having a hard time saying that like, usually I'm fine. It feels like I'm like, I don't have the thing you have where, and I live with you. I watch you, like you'll be like, it's a bad day for me and my separate brain or whatever. Whereas I'm just like, oh, okay. Like I don't know. I just don't.
Yeah, I think you're
that?
well.
No, but then the other thing I will say is also a marijuana. We talk about this all the time. In fact, marijuana.
Well, don't you feel like it like then?
I use
marijuana could sponsor this.
Marijuana in general, the plant, like reach out. We're really helping you stay alive. We are. But okay. I mean, I sometimes get really tired and then I eat an edible and then I'm like, boom, baby, I'm back. And I like write and read and go out and explore. So maybe my brain fog, I'm not allowing the real experience with it because I'm just eating an edible.
No, I don't think that's what's happening.
Okay.
Maybe you're fighting your tiredness. But don't you, when you're high, sometimes I feel dissociated a little bit. Like, but I accept it because I'm high. Even when I'm drinking alcohol, I have that moment where I'm like, oh, I feel different, like a different level of consciousness, and I'm a little more aware that it's like,
oh, that's
I'm
so
separate from my body.
That's like scary.
But I often get panic attacks when I am high because of that, because I start to feel so separate from myself.
But don't you like the fact that you know you'll be sober again and it'll be fine? Or I guess no, because even when you're sober, sometimes you have it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't ever think like, oh, I'll be fine later. I'm just like in the moment panicking. It's mostly alcohol doesn't do it as much. I don't panic because like you're inebriated in a different way.
Yeah.
But with like marijuana, I definitely get really anxious and it spirals really fast.
It actually it like physiologically enhances your senses.
Yeah.
So it would make you feel even more dissociated by what you're listening to, touching, reading, watching.
Yeah. I just find it's like I feel separate from myself, which when it's controlled and you've taken a drug, it's easier to accept. Yeah. But when that happens to me sometimes when I'm just sober, and then it is freakier because you're like, what did I take a drug? Like sometimes I'm like, oh my, okay, I'm obviously an anxious person. Okay, this podcast is like all about me, but like the amount of times I think, oh my God, I accidentally ate an edible. is like pretty often.
Wait, what?
But it will only
What do you
happen.
mean?
Like there'll be moments when
like,
I'm like,
the crumb you ate of your pizza. Was
I
it
don't know.
based?
I'll just be like, I'll start feeling weird and be like, oh my God, what did I eat? Oh my God,
Oh
something
my
I accidentally ate, like had drugs in it. And I'm like absolutely getting high right now. And then I'll have a panic attack and then I'll be like, oh my God. And then my feet will tingle, my hands will tingle.
Oh my God.
And then it will go away and I'll be like, oh, okay, I didn't.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's not
Wow. Like, I mean,
amazing.
okay, maybe it's not amazing, but it's like, I'm like, wow, that is like a cognition roller coaster.
Yeah. So,
That has never happened to me. I'm always like,
Really?
oh yeah, I did eat an edible.
yeah, because you always have. So you're always like, yes, I did.
No, I've never also had that funny, like, the brownies have marijuana at the party. Whoopsie do first. No, everyone has that story.
Yeah, I've
like,
never
I don't have
actually
that
had
story.
that, but my
Oh.
greatest fear is that
And I'm
that's happened.
Also, always stoned at the party. Like, I'm already like, oh, weird. Well, I already smoked a joint. Doesn't matter. True.
I feel like we should wrap it up.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, yeah, I've experienced a lot of brain fog, and now you know about it.
Disassociation,
And
or what is it called? Derealization.
Depersonalization.
Oh,
I had maybe
fascinating.
one experience with derealization that was extended. If I understand it properly, I don't want to self-diagnose myself. Like I did talk to her about my doctor then, but it was like she never said those words. I just reading about it was like, I think that's what happened to me.
Wow. And yeah, I don't really know if I have brain fog. I think I might just be addicted to my phone.
I love how you brought this episode on.
Yeah, I know.
And now you're like,
well, I was like, it's like, it happens in people with celiac disease and autoimmune disorders. And I was like sitting there, like scrolling on my phone, like, oh, maybe what I have is literally like an addiction to TikTok.
yeah, your brain just might be exhausted.
Yeah, it might be like, can you put down the little dopamine overload? Can you put down the TikTok? You need to stop scrolling and hearing like this.
Yeah.
And then I went, "Zoop, and if you're gonna let me down, zoop," like that's all I'm hearing. Like oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. Well, next week we're gonna be talking about the frickin' James Webb Telescope. I'm so excited.
Spoiler. Okay, well, thank you all for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Burp.